Welcome to Books Boys, live from the Grand Library, the Dean and PJ.
He's PJ.
Hi guys, how's it going?
I'm the Dean,
Hey.
and we are the Books Boys.
The one and only.
This is the Books Boys show. Get it? Buy it? Books.
Books.
PJ, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Still confused as to what books are. Something to do with paper, but we'll get to it. I'm getting a notion to what books are.
We'll try and come back to that later. It's a bit tricky.
Okay.
People aren't really
Yeah,
sure.
still not getting it.
We get some fan mail asking, look, I'm listening. I like the show, but I don't know what the heck you guys are even talking about.
Yeah, right.
What are these books?
Paper stuff.
Just to mention, joined in the webcam chat this week by Egyptian Cat Souvenir. So right on
There he
camera.
is. I see you now. There he is. Okay.
There we go.
Wow. Okay.
Let's get stuck in
You
to
always got a
see
special
what.
guest.
Always a special guest. We have Apollo. We have the Christmas
special
rat,
guest.
and now the cheap Egyptian cat souvenir. So
I'm holding a candle, listeners, because I actually wanted this episode to be about spooky ghost stories. But then
We
Dean
did.
reminded me it's
Right.
January.
it's not Halloween.
So I'm
We
4
missed
months
that.
late.
That was our first episode, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Next time there'll be, well, not next time, but it's sometime there'll be spooky ghost stories. So just get ready for that, guys. All right, then. So I think you read a lot this month.
Oh
didn't you?
my God! I read since we last did an episode. I have read 7 books.
Okay,
And that's insane. Now, one of those was your novel, and we already talked about that in a separate show, so that leaves me with 6. I'm going to whittle this down as quickly as I can. One of those
Take your time.
was the El Prisionero del Cielo, The Prisoner of the Sky. It was the 3rd Zaphon book. We're not going to talk about that because next month I'm going to spend most of the month reading the monstrously huge 1,000-page 4th installment, and we're going to do pretty much a whole episode about Zaphon, yeah?
We will indeed. I've also read the whole, it's a tetralogy, but I've read the first 3. And I read another book of his, so we'll talk, it'll be all about Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Actually, next month, won't it? So you can look forward to that, guys.
We're whittled down to 5, or really 4.5. The first 2 books are really the same book. So you may remember on a previous episode, I talked about the sequel to the 3 Musketeers, the 3rd in the trilogy, the Viscount of Bragelonne. That was part 1 of 3. This month I've read parts 2 and 3. So I've got here, I don't know if you can see it. It's a lovely little book. It's a 600 pager, but it's a little pocket size thing. You can slip that in your pocket.
Yeah.
It's a nice bendy cover. Doesn't break.
It looks
good quality.
Well, it looks like a Bible, actually. So
it looks like a Bible, yeah. It's even got the little ribbon. Yeah, it's got a little ribbon to hold your page. It's really thin paper. It looks like a Bible, but it's so easily transportable. I love it. You can just stick it in your back pocket.
It's the good book. All right.
So this is Louise de la Valliere.
Okay.
And the second part that I read, the final part of the Musketeers, The Man in the Iron Mask. Now, this is only a half installment because the rest are all 600 pages. This one's like 250. So it's just a little conclusion rather than maybe a full installment.
Okay.
But I'm going to kind of review these as one book.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, where we left off with the Viscount of Bragelonne was we had read about 600 pages and discovered that he was barely in it. So I thought, well, don't worry, we'll get to the next parts. Maybe we'll see more of this chap. And right at the beginning, here he is, and then he disappears for 400 pages. So still not really about the Viscount of Bragelonne. But who we do see a lot of is this girl, Louise de la Valliere, and that's his fiancée. They are affianced. So he likes this girl, they're engaged to be married, but the king won't let them marry. Then they send him to England, and then we don't see him for 400 pages. They just kind of say, oh, go and speak to the king in England, and, we'll send for you when we want you. Convenient plot device. There goes the main character for most of the book. And then the king decides, well, now that he's gone, I like Louise de la Valliere. Why don't I get with her?
Oh.
Now, of course, the king is already married to the queen and already has a mistress who is just called Madame, who's actually his brother's wife. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on, a lot of
Saucy.
shenanigans. Yeah. This is the
Sounds
kind
like
of thing that
Coronation
happened
Street.
this is the kind of thing that happened with the Louise with the French court, a lot of shenanigans. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, Louise de la Valliere, out of all 5 installments in the Three Musketeers, it's the weakest. Because it's in the middle of a big long book and it was released in 3 installments. So it has no beginning and no end. It just kind of starts randomly and ends randomly, which hurts it a little bit. But then when you factor in that the majority of the book is all about the king and his love for Louise, and then you realize that the Three Musketeers are not involved in that, and that story is completely irrelevant to the overall story arc and barely comes up even in the final installment, you kind of realize you're just wasting your time with this like side story, this Gaiden of, this affair that isn't really relevant. And we don't see much of the Three Musketeers, which is sad. We don't see Porthos very much at all. We see a bit of Aramis and we see Athos once or twice, and it's sad. And, altogether, if you put these 3 installments together, the Viscount of Bragelonne is 1,600 pages almost. And at no point do the 4 Musketeers appear together. So that's the 3 Musketeers plus D'Artagnan in the lead. At no point do all 4 of them appear together. Maybe in 2s, once or twice in 3s. And it's really strange that, this is the massive, massive sequel to your big series, and you somehow write yourself into such a convoluted plot with so many side characters that you're never able to get your 4 characters together in that amount of pages. Is ludicrous.
And what's the point? What do you think was the guy's intention?
Well, you may well ask,
what do you think was
is the
Dumas'
point?
intention?
What is the point? Because I don't know. I mean, the original Three Musketeers is brilliant. The sequel is quite good as well. That's 20 years after. But this massive 3rd installment, I don't really know what the point of most of it was.
But was it written like Dickens and a lot of the other great authors back in the 19th century did in kind of installments in newspapers, for example? Was it a kind of a weekly?
No, he wrote this as with the intention of it being one novel. It was then split up afterwards into installments because it was just too bloody long. Okay. So they had to split it up afterwards. But I mean, Louise de la Valliere, don't get me wrong, it's a nice read, it's an enjoyable book, and maybe if it was a standalone book, I wouldn't mind. And there's a lot of intrigue. There's different characters. There's Malecamp and Manicorn, and there are these 2 kind of stooges type characters, and they're friends, but they're always intriguing. And one of them's so poor that he lives off the other one and pawns his shirt. And then at the end of the month, when he gets his money, he goes and gets his shirt back from the pawnbrokers, and all this kind of thing is going on.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
A lot of shenanigans. And then they're helping the king to meet the girl, and then keep it a secret from his wife and his mistress, and a lot of things like this. And it is an enjoyable read. I just don't really understand. It could have been done maybe in 200 pages instead of 600. It was just really dragged out. And then you realize at the end, it's completely irrelevant to the overall story and to the conclusion. And you kind of think, well, did I kind of waste my time a little bit?
And this sounds like a kind of book you sadly will forget.
Yeah, out of the 5 installments, you would forget it. And at the very the very end, and I swear, the last 15 or 20 pages, he says, Dumas literally writes, but we've forgotten about our protagonist. Here comes Raoul, the Viscount of Bragelonne, and he kind of comes running in, and then the book ends. It's like, let's get to the last installment. And I will say he picked it up. The Man in the Iron Mask is the smallest installment. It's as good, I think, as the original Three Musketeers. He really, really brings it back. It's just action. There's a big siege. We get more of the characters. We see Porthos, who's the big, strong musketeer. Aramis, he's the one that wants to be a priest. He's been doing a lot of weird mischief because he became a priest and then he became a bishop, and now he wants to be pope, and he's going to dethrone the king, and he's joined some kind of Jesuit cult. He's become the leader of the cult, and now he's like doing high treason. Like, there's a lot of political intrigue as well.
So hold on a second. Did he become the Pope?
Hold on. That's it. But he becomes
the Jesuit leader. Yeah.
Becomes the leader of the Jesuit cult that are planning on overthrowing the Pope and the French king. So,
saucy.
Yeah, but I don't know where his ambition came from. I don't remember seeing that ambition in the first book when he was just having some mistresses and dreaming of being a priest. It's a weird. it's a weird way to have the ambition, but then, a lot of time has passed. 20 years between books 1 and 2 and another 10 years later. So it's a lot of time has passed, but
it does sound like Dumas went over it all went over his head a bit, didn't it, the whole thing?
I think he kind of got lost a bit with this book.
Okay, but it's just like it sounds epic, but the problem is with epic stories, you got to keep the threads together. You can't have them loose like that.
It's almost like it's very loose. There's a lot of irrelevant stuff, a lot of characters coming in a Dickensian fashion, but he fails to kind of tie them up and make them relevant in that little beautiful Victorian package where everything all comes together at the end, But what he does do is he does a spectacular ending. There's a big siege. That's great. Aramis kind of renounces his evil ways.
Don't say the ending.
No, I'm not going to give any details. That's literally all I'm kind of going to say. We still don't see everybody together, but we do see everybody, the characters we care about. And our main lead, D'Artagnan, who spends most of these 1,500 pages just standing, leaning against walls, he suddenly springs into action and, gets involved. He's kind of not the captain of the Musketeers, but he's like a sub-captain, a lieutenant or something. So we see a lot more of him towards the end. But you know what annoyed me? The person who wrote the back cover of this clearly didn't read the damn book. Because they've put on the back, never has Dumas' wonderful imagination, inexhaustible and unique, been applied more successfully than in this powerful story of the mystery of the prisoner Louis XIV, whose identity remains a mystery to this day. Was he an illegitimate son of the king? Was he his illegitimate brother? Was he a twin of the king? Whatever one decides, Dumas' masterpiece cannot lie, blah, blah, blah. If you'd read the book, you'd know that Dumas' interpretation, he's very, very clearly the twin of the king. It's right there in the book. So whoever wrote this back cover clearly didn't read it.
Didn't have time. Didn't have time to read the thing.
I mean, it's a really good installment, but you got to get through all the other crap to get to it. That's the problem.
Okay.
And do you know about the Man in the Iron Mask, PJ?
No, I haven't, because like you just said, I'd rather start from the beginning, and I haven't read any of the books yet. So.
But you've not heard the Man in the Iron Mask is based, like all these books, on stuff that is set in history. The Man in the Iron Mask is a myth we first hear about from Voltaire. And
really? Okay.
And it's he's believed to be a real person. He was a prisoner who wore this big iron mask so no one could see who he was.
But as you mentioned, just so you know, listeners, Voltaire, author from Candide.
Yeah, we covered Candide on episode 1, I think.
Or 2, perhaps, but indeed, Candide or L'Optimism. But anyway, say more. So so we don't know who was.
And there's movies about this, and there's a lot of culture about the Man in the Iron Mask, and he was believed to be a real prisoner. Dumas' interpretation is that he's the twin brother of the king, and obviously they didn't want any civil war, so they just took him and put him in a cell all his life, so that nobody would see that there was another pretender to the throne has the same rights really as the legitimate king, and he has to wear this iron mask so no one can see that he looks exactly like the king.
Wow, that's crazy, actually.
So, I mean, if they'd read that, they would have known, but, whatever.
But can you read the book by itself? Or should one read all the books before that?
You see, it's really, really good, but I do kind of feel like... I mean, don't get me wrong, you could kind of read it and get some enjoyment out of it, but you wouldn't really know what's going on or who anyone is.
Yeah, it's a pity, because it does sound... That one sounds good.
I would say even if you read the original Three Musketeers and then you skip to this end part, you would get a bit of enjoyment because you'll at least know the characters. But it's a bit of a drag to read, all 5 installments, especially that 4th one, Louise de la Valliere, is really slow.
Okay.
Really, really slow. Whereas The Man in the Iron Mask, I read in 1 day. I read this during my travels back from Spain. 1 day, yeah.
Wow,
Couldn't put it down. It was just amazing.
Wow, okay, awesome. Yeah, that does sound like a book I would want to read, but not the other one, the 4th one.
That's the problem, yeah. I mean, even the guy who wrote the back cover, who got paid to write the back cover, couldn't make it all the way through. So we can't really expect the listeners,
All right, so tell us more. What did you...
So then I moved on to this month's kind of guilty pleasure book. And I want to rephrase that. I'm not saying anything bad about these books. I'm just saying they're a diversion for me away from the classic literature. So it's when you're listening to, I don't know, jazz or classical music, and then one day you just want to put some AC/DC on. That's your guilty pleasure. Not saying there's anything bad about them. This one's called One Little Mistake. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're my favorite band. But One Little Mistake by Emma Curtis. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not going to give any more spoilers than the front cover itself gives. Okay. On the front cover,
Okay.
you trusted your best friend. You shouldn't have. So, I mean, that's the plot of the book. It's right there on the front cover. I don't know if that was a mistake. I don't know if they really should have done that. But effectively, what we have here is we have this lady. She's got a husband and she's got 3 kids. And
And
she
the book is
decides
called One Little Mistake by who?
by Emma Curtis. So
Okay.
what happens here is she gets herself into some bother. She leaves her kid alone in the house, and then someone breaks in. The kid's fine, but she trusts her best friend with the secret, and she's also having an affair which she trusts her best friend with the secret. So that all happens in like
It's
the first
awesome.
chapter or two, so it's not a major kind of spoiler. Um, and then of course, as you guessed, she shouldn't have trusted her best friend. And then there's a big story about the kind of the intrigue, the betrayal, and everything like that. But also
Right.
it it loses me a wee bit because we get to a part in the end where it's like, oh, but suddenly everyone's been using fake names and your best friend actually isn't, they've got a different name and you've got a different name, and it's getting a bit confusing. There's a little bit too many
All right.
coincidences. If you're going to kind of write those
Mm.
twists in there, you can't do the same twist twice with the two main characters in the same book, I think.
Right. That's a bit unusual. Yeah. So they both had fake
They're
names, and okay.
yeah, they're both using
Well,
different names than they previously used, which is why the story works. And it's kind of,
okay.
I think that's a mistake to do twice, but it is a good
Okay.
book. It's about a 400 pager. It's a really enjoyable read. I like these little romantic thrillers, where it's set
Yeah.
in the real world. You can see the people, their families, their lives. They're just, in England. It feels real. It is kind of rooted in the modern
Yeah.
times, and that is kind of
Yeah.
nice. I don't like a little bit of sexism in it. And you'd think a modern book written by a woman with two main protagonists who are both
Hmm.
female, wouldn't have so much sexism. And I don't even mean, sexism in like a particularly bad way, but just some
Mhm.
stereotypes. I'm not a big
Oh.
fan
No.
of, the only thing a mother should really care about is her children. Like that's her whole kind of meaning of
Okay.
life. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a quick quote here.
Yeah.
I can't understand any woman who would leave her child alone. In my experience, it usually means there's something wrong in the situation, either domestic abuse or a failing relationship. Either way, you're talking about unhappy women who are so engrossed in their own problems they lose sight of what's really important, their children. And there's a lot of bits like that in the book where it's like, but you're the only thing that you should care about is your children, like, and they'll
Yeah.
think I'm
Yeah.
a
I get it
bad
too.
mother because I didn't do that. And that's all of it. And there's bits where,
Yeah.
she's saying to her husband, the bad girl's kind of saying to her husband, your job is just to go out and earn money for me, basically, and my job's to kind of stay home and, be pretty or whatever. There's a lot of weird sexist stereotypes that I didn't expect from like a modern book written by a female author.
Right. Okay. Jeez. All right. Well, that's a pity, but especially from a modern woman author. I mean, but anyway, all right. Yeah, that's a pity. I also don't enjoy that.
I don't particularly enjoy it either, but it's one of those things that, sometimes it happens. Um, it's nothing too bad. It's nothing, insulting or anything. It's just those kind of stereotypes.
Which is just a
Yeah.
pity. Yeah.
Before I move on to the final 2 books that I read, though, I just want to quickly step back for 30 seconds because what I fail to point out
Yeah.
about the Dumas books is the thing that makes me love them the most. And when I compare it to this book, it kind of reminded me. It's the romance, the kind of thing that you'll have seen yourself when you've
Mm.
been reading Cervantes a couple of months ago, when you see
Yeah.
the chivalry. And there's a great scene where this guy insults his friends, so they have a duel to the death, and they kind of charge at each other on horses, and one of them is dying and the other guy runs away, and then someone comes and finds him and helps him, and of course they accuse him of having been the one to hurt him in the first place. And then he says, if you accuse him, I will fight you to the death because this guy helped me. And it's just constantly like, I will fight everyone to the death, even though I'm dying already. I've got no strength in my body. But if you say a bad word
That's
against this person, I will have another duel with you immediately, sir. It's just this jumping straight into,
that's
to the chivalry.
that's very Don Quixote esque because no, but because Don Quixote is constantly getting into fights, but then he says like, "Oh, we just want to help me," and says, well, "How dare you touch my hand, thou swine, you!" And like then he says, I challenge you to a duel," and he's like, "Well, I'm just a farmer, just here taking on my crops." And he said, "No, I challenge you. You stole the treasure from Ghana or something like that. Or you stole that princess from Zambia." And like this is not medieval Spain anymore. This is just kind of like just Renaissance Spain, but still very much commercial kind of values, and not anymore chivalry. But I hear that Dumas was very influenced, as was Dickens, as were
Yes, I think so.
as
I mean, as was
Flaubert.
every author, basically.
Basically, yeah, but just especially the character of Don Quixote, basically that person who doesn't want to live in the real world. I think every author can relate to that, and that's why it's been so.
Yeah, I mean, I
much,
think my own life kind of runs along that kind of trajectory,
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
But I have
Everyone.
one very quick quote. It's only a 2-line quote, but I love it. It just gives you a bit of an idea of the
From
kind of
Dumas,
theme of
yeah.
the book. So this is the king. "O human heart, compass for kings to steer by. When shall I learn to read your secret folds like the pages of a book? No, I am not a bad king. No, I am not a poor king. But alas, I am still a child." And he kind of realizes that, he's been governing just through, selfishness and his own desires like a child
Mm,
instead of what's good
mm.
for his subjects. So I recommend trying to read at least the original Three Musketeers book.
Okay.
Do
Sounds
you want me
cool.
to go on with my last two, or do you want to take a break and do some stuff yourself? What do you think, PJ?
No, go ahead. No, I think no. Go ahead
Very good.
and talk about your last two books. Yeah.
So then we're gonna have highs and lows. We're gonna go on a book related roller coaster. Okay. The first
All
one
right.
is the
Let's have it.
high. This is "Keep the Aspidistra Flying" by George Orwell. Now, you
Oh yeah.
probably haven't read this one, but I'm guessing you know about Animal Farm and 1984, right?
Love 1984 particularly. Yeah.
So this is earlier than that. It's his third out of his 6 novels. It's his
Mm.
second or third. The 2 famous ones are the last 2. So this
Yeah.
one was a little bit earlier, and I mean they're all his novels are short. This is 300 pages of big text. I'd say you could get this done in about 200 pages if you tried. Basically, there's no plot to this until near the end. Most of the book, it's just this guy who doesn't want to live in the money world. He doesn't want to live in the money world. He doesn't like capitalism. He just wants something different. His friend is a socialist, and he's not a socialist, and he's not a communist, but he's a bit of a nihilist. He wants war to come and just wipe everything out. He just kind of thinks that London is just a disaster. And even though this is written in the 1930s, 100 years after some of Dickens' key works, it's Dickens' London. Like it's the same London. You can see the continuity in it. And this guy, I mean, he's got a fiance. They've never slept together because she won't do that till they're married, and they're too poor to afford to get married. So there's this ongoing tension with
dilemma.
him. Yeah, they've got this dilemma, and there's this ongoing tension.
Dilemma.
But he causes all of his own problems. And although in the beginning you think, well, I'll sympathize with this guy, I kind of get where he's coming from. He's been dealt a bad hand. He works in a bookshop, so like straight away I like him. But then,
Of course.
he keeps screwing everybody over basically. So he's living off his family. They're all poor, but they all saved up money to send him to university. He did no work in university, kind of dropped out near the end, didn't put any effort in. Then he still got a good job anyway because his family, set him up with a job. He quit the good job. He later gets another good job that he also quits. So he's causing his own problems, and he keeps saying, "I just want to go to the gutter. Like I don't want to live in this capitalist world. I don't want a good job. I don't want to be a happy little family in their little house with an Aspidistra on the shelf." This is his symbol of like boring domestic life, is this plant, this Aspidistra. And he just wants to live in the streets, to go to the gutter. And he's sponging off his family and his friends. He's borrowing money from his cousin that he has no intention of ever paying back. But there's not really a story, and he's also an alcoholic as well. And he keeps getting drunk and stuff like that. So he's not really the kind of character that you really feel much empathy for. And it gets really, really bad when he also sexually assaults the girlfriend, the fiance. So you kind of
Right,
think
okay.
like this isn't like a sympathetic character, you know. And I don't want to spoil the ending,
Don't spoil the ending. That
but
was a lot of information.
it's a nice read. You don't like the main character, but it all, it all kind of comes to a head eventually.
Okay. I was just gonna say, like, what about the last read you said you had? Was
The
that
last one I'll cover in 2 minutes very quickly. I decided to
okay?
step back to an even older book. I normally stick with Victorian kind of books. I decided to go a little bit
Yeah.
earlier. This is a book
All
highly
right.
recommended
Back in time.
by Orwell, and it is Gulliver's Travels, Jonathan
Is
Swift.
that why you read it?
Yeah, I
Is that
mean
why you read
that's
it?
one of the reasons I read it. It's been on my shelf for ages, and it says in the back, Orwell recommended it as one of the 6 most indispensable books in the world. So,
Really? Okay.
and I mean,
Okay.
really boring. The longest 300 pages I've ever read in my life. Really, really, it was just a drag to get through.
You see, I just know the plot, and I love the plot, so that surprised me. So I would have expected it to be a great kind of adventure
You would think.
book.
Imagine a book that, I mean, it's all prose. There's no dialogue, and there's not
Okay.
really many paragraphs. So you tend to just get pages of constant chunks of narration, and that's
That's
just
tedious.
endless
Yeah, I hate
narration.
that.
It's very tedious, and it's split into 4. And all the 4 parts were important, and we needed them because they influence a lot of other work later. So the first part is with the Lilliputians. That's the little kind of miniature people. And we get obviously a lot
Yeah.
of things from that. We get the Borrowers, and we've even had some, Studio Ghibli work with that kind of stuff. So that's
Yeah, of
something
course,
that permeates through the
It's
culture.
it's in the for example, the Laputa Castle in the Sky,
Exactly.
for example, that's influenced by it, and Arrietty was the of course
Yeah,
was the
exactly.
Borrowers is based on that. So yeah, I was looking forward to this book, and now you say it's not that good.
Yeah. Well, that's only the
So,
first part, you see. So then they're all about
right.
70 pages each, roughly, these kind of 4 parts. So after
Okay.
Little People, he goes to the second part, and I think he ran out of ideas immediately and said, "Oh, we'll just do Big People next." So they go to Brobdingnag, and suddenly they've got really big people, and he's the little person, and it's just a reverse of the same story, basically.
Okay.
Then the third part, I think he had a lot of little ideas but didn't know what to do with them all. So he mixed them all up in one, and there's a floating island castle, which is one of the cities he visits, and there's a city of ghosts, and he just kind of puts a lot of little ideas, but he doesn't really have any story or any plot for any of them.
Again, a pity, because I kind of think of that is epic. I love those ideas, but like you say, they're just like a bit disjointed, which is a pity.
At this point, he's just throwing ideas
random.
out, yeah. And the only time I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it was the last part. He goes to this place, I think you'll like this, where the humans are the servants and horses are the citizens.
Oh, I actually do love that. Yeah.
And the horses are talking, and he tries to live like a horse, and he's like distancing himself from these other humans who are called yahoos, who are brutes and savages, and he doesn't want to be like them. And this is the most humorous part. And by the end of it, he's actually well, there's no plot stories, but he just he tries to emulate the horses, was all I was kind of gonna say.
Which reminds me, that's interesting. Hold on a second. Hold on, stop there a second. That's very interesting, because we just talked about George Orwell. That's very much like Animal Farm. The
Yes.
what is it again? The pigs trying to imitate the humans. Isn't
Exactly.
that it?
Yeah, the pigs imitate the humans, and the other animals can't even tell which is which by the end of it. And I think that's maybe an
I'd agree.
influence here. But I mean, I should point out this is meant to be satire. He's doing a satire of travel books where people go to real places and just write kind of boring travel stories. So he did a satire where they go to these kind of magical places with floating castles and massive giants and whatever.
So yeah, I heard about that. It's supposed to be a parody of just the travel guide of the time, which was very different to the kind of travel guide you have now. It was very subjective as well, wasn't it, back then? And just kind of like more like a memoir. But also I heard that it was banned for that. It was banned for that reason. People thought it was blasphemous, very insulting towards those authors and towards the people who read it. And I think also people considered it a very cynical book. So like it wasn't very it wasn't popular by all.
It's just a shame that it's quite boring, I think maybe just dialogue would have broken things up, but I guess they hadn't got to that in 1726. I don't know.
That is such a pity, because the ideas I actually do love those. That sounds like, you see, that sounds like the kind of thing I would have enjoyed a lot,
Yeah. I think that's it. They took great ideas, and then, I think people have done better things with all those ideas since.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, PJ, I think it's
Well,
your turn. Do you want to tell us what you've been reading?
yeah. I want to talk about. I want to talk about basically the stuff I've been reading is a lot of poetry this month, and I've been reading a lot of poems from my dad, actually. So as you know, Kyron Bourke calls himself also Kyron Bourke. He's a musician. He's an artist. He's a writer. He's a painter and an actor, and is an all-round, great chap. Actually, very good friend of mine, being my dad. So it's good that he's my friend. And just because we're editing poems, our own poems, at the beginning of the month, I was just reading a lot of his poems, and I continued reading his poems, and then he also sent me his third novel, basically, which is in process. So I just wanted to kind of just revise everything he's kind of always sent me throughout the years, and that was a lot of different stuff. But I'll start with the poetry. Basically, he's known as a musician and a lyricist, so not really a poet. So reading his stuff as poems and also reading the what are basically lyrics as poems is a very different experience. And I find that reading his stuff, as obviously me being his son, is obviously it's a very subjective experience. But I'm also just reading into it a lot of the kind of history of Ireland. And basically, for those of you who don't know, Northern Ireland has been obviously Northern Ireland for quite some time now, Dean. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dean. Has it been 99 years?
I think, yeah, 100 years this year sometime.
100
yeah.
years this year? 100 years this year, and it's quite relevant. My dad grew up in Dublin, but he's been living in Northern Ireland for quite some time. I'm not going to mention the years because his age is a secret. No, it's a secret. So no spoilers. He's been here for a while, and in Belfast when I say here. And so basically, when I read his stuff, when I read his the two novels he finished, and also the one he's writing, the bit that I've read, it's very much basically Irish history from the last, however old it is. That's a secret. Let's just say it's been a few years, and it's all that history. But he even goes back to the roots of Ireland. Talking about St. Patrick bringing the snakes, and people, basically all the people on horses, and as soon as they get off it, they grow old and all that. And that's basically all in his prose, in his poems, in his songs, in his paintings. And what I like about him is that, and not enough artists do this, I find, that he just expresses himself through whatever medium he needs to express himself. I really enjoy that. And for any Polish listeners, when I was in Poland, Stanisław Wyspiański reminded me of my dad, because that's an author who was active around 1900, who was both a painter and a writer. And however, my dad's also a musician and an actor, so I thought it was even more. But even that, just being a famous painter a famous painter, playwright, and poet, that was Wyspiański. So just being those three things was like, oh my God, you did too much, but you kind of succeeded, and we're going to love you for that. Well, my dad did even more. So, I mean, that's all I want to say about that. And like Wyspiański, who grew up in South Poland, the mountain area, and talked about those people, like the Gorelskis, my dad kind of focuses on the people he knows best, so the Irish. But then also he talks about how he just doesn't understand Ireland. Now that's one big theme, but also his work also gets very raw sometimes and very personal. It's always kind of interlinked. Irish, often tragic, or more tragic than anything. History interlinked with his own life, sometimes comedic and sometimes tragic too, I feel. So I've been reading from his latest book, which he calls after his latest album. So both of them are called No Citation. And the theme of it is basically he's been working for quite some time in the in the art world, music, poetry, everything, acting. And he got, he's not really getting the recognition. Not that he's saying that he deserves recognition, but he's not getting. He probably feels like it's been a long road, and
Yeah.
that's, what I mean. So like, I think like I would also get to that point where it's like I've been doing a lot of stuff, and yeah, but I'm not quite as recognized as I feel that I should be by now. Because in the end, it's like you've put a lot of work into your art, and it's not about being best or whatever, but it's just about being recognized.
Yeah.
And I find that very relevant because he released that album during the first quarantine, and it's basically just no one's getting any citation, really. I mean, yeah, some are, but especially the musicians and the artists, they're getting no citation anymore. So I found that very relevant. And at the same time, the album I'm talking about now is incredibly personal. So I don't think he ever did a more personal album. And for me, there's a lot of kind of he wrote a song about me. He also wrote a song about both my grandfathers, funny enough, in that album. And about my brother is in it as well. And his brother who passed away in 2013. There's a lot of death and birth and kind of like history repeating itself in funny ways. And there is even a song in it, was basically about Trump. I did not realize it was about Trump at the time. No, I didn't realize, but it's about Trump. I have to ask him that. But I only realized when I read No Citation and Other Poems, which includes, if not all, the lyrics from No Citation, some of the other albums, and a few poems that are not turned into songs, or at least not into record songs. Mm-hmm. And he did. He there's a very angry song in that album that I did not exactly realize was about Trump, but now reading about it, and as a poem, it kind of makes more sense. He changed the title to November 2016. Yes. And so that makes more sense to me now. And anyway, I'm not sure if I want to actually read out a few of his poems, but I'm going to maybe read out that one another time.
I like that one, actually.
Yeah, that's a good one, right? Anyway, I really like that one too. No Citation, the album, it comes across as very, I want to say the word, what's the word exactly? I want to say angry, but it comes across as very sort of critical of modern society and about a lot of things, actually. So it's from all his albums, I find that it's like his most kind of social one, or like the biggest social critique, and the poems as well in some sense. But he adds a lot of personal anecdotes, and more than anecdotes, and also just tragedies in it. So it's very raw, and they always have been very raw. That's what I love about his art in general. It's always been very raw. I mean, do you want to remember, like, for example, as an actor, when you saw him as well? I mean, that was also a very sort of personal experience. I found it was it was very naked, sort of his experience as the big bad wolf. So
that's one of my two main memories of Kyron, is watching him as the big bad wolf, playing that piano with the full moon in the sky and doing the full kind of 360 back turn. That was an awe-inspiring moment. I saw that in the theater twice, and I've watched a recording since. It's amazing.
Yeah, we watched it together, right? The first time.
We saw it together.
What's your second memory?
The second memory is going to teatro and seeing him play, nice candlelit dinners, and seeing him just sing and play piano. I took all my dates there in the old days, just to nice romantic spot, beautiful kind of setting, great voice, just really set the tone, set the mood,
Actually, great thing is that all his albums, the last two albums and the one coming up in February, they're available in Bandcamp, and I think they're incredibly. He's very generous with. I gotta say, I've told him this as well. Like, I sure you want to do this, and I said, well, yeah, he's fine with doing it. Like, they're all very cheap. Like, that's what I find quite incredible as a musician. Not really many money, but he's just putting the music there almost for free up on Bandcamp and on YouTube anyway and stuff like that.
And so I've been listening to him on Spotify last couple of days as well.
Oh yeah, well there you go. So I mean, but yeah. Anyway, I want to read out this poem, which is. That I suggest he puts into the final edits of No Citation and Other Poems, because it's still not quite finished. So he's got a short version, I'm trying to convince him making a long version. He's also in the middle of writing a novel, and he's in the middle of doing a short movie, so he's a busy man. And this was written perhaps. So anyway, so I'm going to put it now into recording. My Sorcerer, My Inquisitor by Kyron Bourke. No one else could run clear across the universe or charm reindeer quite as good as you, or blow sweet sad music through the purple mist, or float naked in silver blue. And your tears, all your tears were turquoise. You who could walk on orange and yellow air and make snowflakes turn chimney red while moonlight shone all day long through your hair. And caterpillars slept inside you, while your silence came to me like songs of kings. How long I would wait for your answers, only for the words to drown in the fluttering of butterfly wings. And now with time and oceans between us, I want to touch the emptiness in your belly, which defines from the workings of your hearts. And if you watched me from above, needing you and kissing you there, would you concede that my soul was good and true? Or would you still suspect me of being an addict for conjuring tricks?
That's very powerful.
So yeah. And his two novels, by the way, are fictional, but they're surprisingly autobiographical. And they're still fiction, but that's for another time. But anyway, I actually love both the novels and his plays, but I'm looking forward particularly to the third novel, which is it sounds a bit like a Dostoevsky kind of Dostoevsky on cider. Do you know what I mean? It's a very kind of it's a very Dublin dark, grimy tale, and there's darkness and kind of things in his two novels, but I think this one is a lot more kind of like this is Breaking Bad now in Dublin, kind of. That's the way it sounds.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Can't wait to read it then. But PJ, I think I hear the phone ringing. Do you wanna pick up and see who's calling into the show?
Okay. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Can't believe it, Dean. It's my actual dad.
Your dad's actually ringing on the show. It's Kyron Bourke live on the Books Boys.
Live on the Books Boys.
Welcome to the show. What a great coincidence. You're calling in.
Yeah,
Jesus.
I was curious about what you guys were getting up to.
I mean, our story could be a good old kind of the Kenjin kind of story going on there. Kylos Risa fun, yeah.
I mean, I hope that you guys have a happier story than most of the Dickens I've read. I don't know if that's a comparison you want to get too far into.
It's the Dickens on his best day. Feeling optimistic, feeling Pickwickian. That's
a lot of Dickens ended up happily, though, didn't it? I mean, let's have it.
Yeah.
It usually ends happy, yeah.
Oh yeah, terrible stuff goes on in the middle.
Yeah, you've got to have a lot of hardship, and then at the very end, everyone's happy, and they're all they all get married, and it's it's a brilliant happy ending. But they go through some hardships to get there.
What's your favorite Dickens? Both of you? Dean, what's your favorite Dickens?
I don't want to be a stereotype, but I think I have to say Oliver Twist.
It's a good one.
It is a good one. I mean, I've read them all, but I still think it was one of the first I read, and it just endured as it's just a lovely story. And although it's sad in parts, but it just stands out, and the characters are brilliant. The Artful Dodger and Fagin. It's just, I don't know. There's something really special about that one.
Yeah.
What about you, PJ?
The one that the Pickwick Papers. Sure, it's the one where it's the one we're always quoting. That's why I always say capital.
But Kyron, what's your own favorite Dickens?
It has to be Nicholas Nickleby.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
It's a good one.
I love Nicholas. I love him, and I love Smike, and I love the characters Smike, and I hate when Smike dies, but I love their adventures when Nicholas Nickleby rescues them from Judah Boys' school, and he lashes Squares with Mr. Squares with the whip, whatever they used to chastise the children with.
Yes.
So then they escape, himself and Smike escape, and they go on the road for a while. They go on the road, but they meet up with a fit-ups theatrical traveling show. And Nicholas, of course, is an ideal leading man, and Smike is an ideal guy who's starving. He has the most the best character face that the great ham actor who runs the show ever saw. So I love these elements in it. You know, and recently I saw in the Crescent Arts Centre a play called Do the Boys Hall. It was simply taken from the moment Nicholas Nickleby signs on with Squares.
Okay.
You know, his uncle, to when he rescues Smike. So a whole play, you could take that story and make several plays out of it, Nicholas Nickleby. You could possibly do the same with Oliver Twist. I must say, Oliver Twist, my dad used to do the whole Oliver Twist on a table with costumes for us on Friday nights.
Oh, that's amazing.
Jesus, that was incredible. And he remembered the whole thing. And this was before the musical came out. You know, when the musical came out, okay, everyone was, Fagin was iconic then, you know.
Yes.
But, and Mr. Bumble and the whole Artful Dodger. But when my dad did the whole play, and I remember, you know, something. I took this play. I know where he was reading from. He was reading from a version that had pictures in it, and it was, you know, one of the plays for amateur societies. I lost the blasted thing. I had his class in the Liberties in Dublin. I was teaching drama for a while, and I don't think he ever forgave me. He used to say to me right towards the end, "What about that Oliver Twist?" Because that happened to me tonight. I was thinking of calling in the books boys when discussing literature. I find that because I'm not living with all my books, some of them are in a house in Spain and some of them are in a house in Fermanagh, and the rest are in a storage down the road. So I might have in the house here about 150 books, which is nothing for us, right, PJ?
Yeah. I mean, like the same with me. I've got them all over the place as well. Poland, Japan, Russia, Ireland. In your place, I've got some books in your house.
You have.
So, and that actually, that's interesting. You mentioned Dickens and your grandfather, because I did want to ask you about like the influence of your dad's in your work. So I mean, in No Citation, you got a song called "What an Actor," and also in the poetry books. So they're all interlinked. That's why I'm mentioning the music and the poetry.
Oh yeah, well, he was a great actor. Your grandfather, but his father, PJ Bourke.
That's what I'm named after.
Oh yeah, he was a famous actor, an actor manager, and had a couple of traveling shows on the road. They called them fit-up shows because they simply arrived in the village and set up a tent and off they went. Or they could use a village hall, depending on what they could get. But they were going from town to town. But he ended up managing the Queen's Theatre on Pearse Street. Now gone. It became the Abbey took it over when the Abbey fire happened.
And was your new novel, the one coming out? I get the feeling, as I do with the other stuff, that and from our talks, that you have some, let's just say you have some problems basically with the Irish upbringing. I wanted to talk to you about basically that in your novel, the one you're writing about, you're talking a lot about the dark sides of growing up in Dublin in the 60s, 70s. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah, true. I had the weird experience of coming from a not impoverished family, but we certainly weren't wealthy. But we had this theatrical background, which made us, which kind of gave us middle class. By the way, middle class in Dublin in those days meant you had a 3-bedroom house and you were a civil servant, or you were a white collar worker. Didn't mean anything financial. So we had a 3-bedroom house in which was called a purchase house.
Right. Okay.
You know the house, but across the other side of the church were the corporation houses, the corpo houses, and those people rented their houses. Now, they had 3 bedrooms as well, 1 bathroom. But I was known as a poshie because I went to the school across the church, and my parents had no idea what they were doing to be sending me to that church. And some guys with their heads down, kept their heads down. But I was in a class. There was A, B, and C. I was in B. If you were in A, you were cool. You were with guys who were studious, the best of the bunch. I was. If you were C, was I don't know what happened to people in C. But in B, there were a lot of people who I suppose my parents wouldn't have wanted me to mix with. But that's what I'm writing about. I got to know a lot of stuff.
Because basically, just for listeners, what you're doing is you took your own play, Catnap, which is about a female detective. It's basically a noir, basically a female detective going against the rough guys in Dublin. And there's a very interesting for me, it's very interesting because it's kind of like the women are going after like scruffy kind of men, and they're all very kind of, they're all kind of very pretty much vile men. And I find also when Catnap, for me, the play was very sort of all of a sudden this is Dublin becoming very cosmopolitan, not really like your childhood. But now you're saying that the Catnap, so you're writing a novel basically, which is like Catnap extended or Catnap revisited, and but now you seem to be focusing a lot on, that's why I mentioned Dostoevsky, you seem to be focusing a lot on these dark characters from Catnap, which you didn't go too deep into. Now you're actually going into why they're so effed up, basically.
Exactly. Right? I'm taking their backstories. The play presents a lot. The central figure in Catnap, who's kidnapping people's dogs and cats, is a guy who feels absolutely marginalized. Beautiful African ladies are in costumes, and handsome, what he sees as handsome Romanian men, and Russian women going around in beautiful leopard print goddamn trousers washed onto them. I mean, the guy, he's the man. He feels nobody looks at him. He's a pale-faced guy from Mullingar or something. He works as a hospital porter and he lives in the flats, and he's surrounded by exotica. Now, they might see themselves as being in a bad position, or everyone may be on the dole, and some of them may even be illegals, and some of them may all the problems inherent in immigration. But all he sees is that nobody's noticing him.
Yeah.
He's intimidated by the wonderful people who come from every corner of the world to this neighborhood where he also has to live because he's not wealthy either. That's one of the central themes. But the gangsters run the place. But the gangsters now have a problem because there are gangsters from Eastern Europe also trying to take over. And that's where I'm going with it. And there's a backstory of how my gangster became a gangster in the first place.
Right. Okay. You see, what I like about Catnap Extended, let's just call it, is that it's. Do you agree with this, Dean? It's very. I haven't read it yet, Dean, but
I haven't read it. No.
But just from the themes alone, they're very kind of existentialist. I know that sounds maybe slightly pretentious or so, me saying it, but it is basically. It's kind of like post-war existentialism was Camus. Is very like Dostoevsky's pre-communist existentialism, and it's all basically. And now, as an existentialist time, was COVID and just Trump just left, thank God, but still Boris Johnson's around. And I find you're just observing it, that all of it, and you're observing a lot of the populism basically that's rising, but you're focusing on your own territory, you know. So it's just kind of like something which a lot of authors do. You're focusing on what you know. You're not really going to like, oh, I'm going to write about Finland and like do some research. You're not really the research kind of author. You're just more like, I'm going to stick to what I know best. Because there are like Colin McCann, for example, is a great research novelist, but you're more of I'm going to stick to my deep experiences, and you're getting even more into the dark sides of whatever you saw in your life. It's like very brave, I find. Well, it's very inner kind of.
I will do research, but it'll be about something I already know about. And I'll reiterate.
Exactly, that's what I meant.
I'll reiterate my research with other people's experiences, and I'll double check things and so on.
Exactly, yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, and also you write and paint and about Piano Man, you know, or about The Mind Reader. Your other novel is about a man who's in the Canaries. So you do, and because of me, you spend a lot of time in Canaries. So I love that about.
I'll take them elsewhere, but they're essentially
our experiences
that I can relate to. So even though I can relate to my central characters because of who they are, but I also know that these, you know, have the feeling of alienated feelings that the people have who may seem derogatory about foreigners,
And
it's actually an inferiority complex.
and like this feeling a bit like isolated, that's where no citation comes into play, right? And your new your upcoming short movie as well. What's it called again?
The short movie is called No Explanation.
No explanation.
It's very much a movie about two people writing about the lockdown. But the backdrop of it is the last lockdown. But the movie would only be possible because of the song. And of course, Eileen O'Neill, I wrote the lyrics of one song out of 8. She is a support poet.
We had her poetry on.
Yeah, you did. I heard
December,
that.
yeah.
I mean, her words are absolutely stunning.
Awesome.
Well, look, we're probably going to wrap this up now. Dean, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you just generally, before we let you go, 2 questions. Just to tie it back to, what we do mostly, which is just kind of book recommendations. Can you tell me the last book you read and also just a general recommendation from your old favorites?
Yes, I'll give you the last book you read. This is, I don't know, but people are, oh my goodness, that's not literature. It's Anthony Horowitz.
Oh, yes.
Magpie Murders. He's the guy who writes, for example, Boyle's War, very intelligent TV thing. Writes a lot of books, but Magpie Murders, it's a great romp. Great mystery and a great time-shifting novel as well. So I recommend it to anybody.
He wrote Alex Rider and then that series of books, didn't he?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And typically he writes about a writer and publishers who are, I won't tell you the story, but the writer, their main author is murdered. And the backstory comes in and out. It's great. That's the most recent thing I've read a couple of weeks ago.
And what's the book you recommend?
Recommend for people to go out and buy. Well,
in general.
I'm always trying to think what's one of my favorite novels, and I'll tell you something. Iris Murdoch is one of my favorite novelists.
Yeah.
So I picked Nuns and Soldiers as my favorite. One of my, my top 5. It's in my top 5. Nuns and Soldiers.
So yeah, just for the listeners.
Anyone who hasn't read Iris Murdoch and sees one in a shop, bookshop, secondhand bookshop, or anything, I would suggest get it. But if you want my favorite, Nuns and Soldiers, but I wouldn't be at all disappointed if I couldn't find it and I put my hand out and any one of her books came into my hand.
Oh, they're great, yeah. The Sandcastle is my favorite, I think. But Iris Murdoch is...
I haven't read it for a while. It's good.
It's good, yeah. Just so you know, for the listeners, Iris Murdoch was an Anglo-Irish novelist who got Alzheimer's in the end and passed away, but she's known for her existentialist themes, and she was also a philosophy academic as well. So she wrote about Camus and Sartre.
And something we both agreed on, PJ. Jackson's, what was the novel called? Jackson's
Dilemma, I think.
Jackson's Dilemma. Yeah. We both agreed on this, or did you agree with me, that her vocabulary, it dealt with somebody who was forgetting, and her vocabulary seemed to be much tighter, much less words than usual. And we thought that maybe she commenced that book.
It's a pity, yeah. Alzheimer's is a big. I was associated with her, yeah, for some reason.
Yeah. So, but it was a brilliantly written book for somebody who may have been in the early stages or any stages of.
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely.
Memory loss condition.
And just for the listeners, I really recommend Iris Murdoch if you want novels about basically kind of memory shifting and trying thoughts that keep running in and out. Reading Iris Murdoch, you kind of often forget what's happening because it feels like a dream, the whole thing, all of it. So I do love that about it.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very underrated novelist.
You can go back and read any of her novels, and they're kind of fresh. I don't remember.
Really recommend it.
It might sound like a bad thing. What was it about? Actually, it's a month ago. I can't. That's good.
I don't know what it's about anymore. Yeah, it's Sandcastle. Yeah.
Did I ever know what it was about?
Yeah.
You know what else is a good book? The Woman in the Dunes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Gave you that for your birthday last year.
You did. And I had read it years and years ago, and it's still a good read. I'll tell you another one I like, Right Ho Jeeves by P.G. Woodhouse. Once you get that, then you read all the P.G. Wodehouse books.
PG
Well,
recommended them to me, and I did read 2 of them, and I don't know, I just couldn't really get into it. I thought it was Agatha Christie, but without the plot. I don't know, without the twist.
Agatha Christie losing the plot.
That's what it is, yeah.
I suppose you got to be an enthusiast or not. Lads, Midnight's Children, Salman Rushdie. Has to be it.
Oh, Midnight's Children, yeah.
The imagery in that, the double meanings, the treble meaning. And for those who think you have to know about Islam and Hindu and Indian lore, you don't, because he's already got 2 meanings going on before you even get to the third. He's the genius.
Yeah,
I own a copy of that book. I'll have to try it. I only read the first few pages, and I found his writing style a bit weird for me, and I just stopped. So I'll have to go back to it and give it a try.
Here's a little plot twist for all of you listeners. The copy my dad is holding is actually your copy, Dean.
What? I don't have it anymore. Oh no.
Yeah, no, I just for some.
Are you sure?
But you said at the time I could have it, so
yeah, I think I remember now. Yeah, I thought it was still lying on one of the bookshelves.
You know where I live. You can pick this up. I have another copy in Spain. I've got one down in Valliere.
Don't worry. I've got so many books in my queue to get to. It'll be about a year before I have time to put a new one in anyway.
Said, this runs out of steam. It's like, to me, I can't. It's like book 3. It's part 3 of it. Runs out of steam. They're in the jungle, and I remember that they stuffed mud in their ears to stop the awful noises, and of course they never hear again because they get infections. And that's a great imagery from lots of stuff. But apart from that, I kind of got bored with them in the jungle. But and then he comes back to his old haunts, and it's got to be read. Dean, you know what? Pick it up. Got to read it. You can make me read something that I don't like as well.
There you go.
What do you not like? What do you not like?
Oh God, lots of stuff. Something that maybe, you know what, you were talking about a few weeks ago, Don Quixote. And I have never, although Salman Rushdie said also it was the best book ever written and his favorite when I heard him in Belfast giving a lecture. And I've never tackled it. So
it's one that I need to get to as well, I was relying on PJ kind of filling me in and telling me how it was first before I tackled it myself, because I want to read it in Spanish, and I wanted to make sure my Spanish was ready, before I tried to read it. I mean, I can read okay. So, for example, next month I'm going to read the 4th Zafon book in Spanish, and that's I can.
You've read all the Zafon book in Spanish.
I've read them all in Spanish, yeah. But I was just worried with Quixote being, maybe a little bit old-fashioned language. It might be trickier,
Well, Don Quixote is because it's just that is he basically started the modern Spanish with it, like Martin Luther did was modern German. This is basically modern Spanish, basically.
Fair enough. So it's not going to be like reading Shakespeare, where you can only really understand about 60% of it, even in English. No?
Exactly, not like that. No. So, what's your book recommendation, Dean?
My book recommendation, I think if I had to give a book recommendation, I'm going to give The Kin. I'm just going to look up the author's name, but The Kin is this set of 4 books, and they describe these kind of early world. It's by Peter Dickinson. They describe these early world kind of children. It's almost like a creation story. It's set 200,000 years ago, and it's about these 4 children. It's divided into 4 books, and it's just their story about kind of getting to know each other and the world, and animals around them, and just the world. It's just a nice. It's kind of for kids. It's not an adult book as such, but I think you could definitely sit down and read it. It's just a kind of creation story in 4 different perspectives and 4 different myths. If you get the collection of the all 4, it's massive, but it's really, really worth reading, particularly kind of, I would say, maybe for kids and for teens especially, maybe.
Dean, it's called The Kin, K-I-N.
K-I-N, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'll check it out.
I'd say my book recommendation, just because my dad's on the show today, has to be Laying On Thick, good old Salman Rushdie. The book is called Harun and the Sea of Stories.
Oh, great book.
So you gave me the book. You gave me 2 versions of the book: a picture book and the book by itself when I was about 9 or 10. And I loved it as a kid, and I loved it when I read it 2 years ago twice in one go. I read it, and then I had to read it again. I think it's possibly, this is very controversial, but I think it might be possibly the best children's book along with Heidi. So I think those two books are definitely my favorite books from the children's. But both of those books will be among my top 10 if I had to take 10 books out of space. If I were going to space taking 10 books, I would have to take Heidi along and by Johanna Spiri and Harun and a Sea of Stories. I think Salman Rushdie, his absolute talent is children's literature, not adult fiction.
Okay, I'll have to give him another try then.
Yeah, try Harun and a Sea of Stories for pure magic.
It's a great read. I'm interested. Yeah. We've never discussed Heidi before. I love Heidi as well.
Oh, I love Heidi. Yeah, have we not discussed it? It's a great book.
Maybe, I didn't know you felt that strongly about it. And, certainly, I loved it. When I was a kid, there were radio series, and the first I read Heidi, of course, but the radio series of Heidi maybe ran for 10 weeks, and all of those things. I mean, that's how I first saw Rebecca. That's how I first saw a lot of Dickinson stuff, plays on the radio.
Yeah.
And they seem like films to me.
Yeah,
I saw them. I
Interesting.
listened to the radio, but I saw those people, and I saw that wheelchair rolling down, Heidi's wheelchair being shoved down the mountainside.
Her friend's wheelchair. Yeah.
What? And then, oh no, it's a good thing. I mean, I remember that moment. I loved when she tried to save the soft bread for her grandfather's teeth were probably missing or gone.
As well.
Have you read it in German?
You see, I did read it in English when I was a kid, but when I read it in German, it was mind-blowing. So just that's a fiction in translation is lost often people. So try to read an original like Dean is doing there with Stefan. That's what I recommend. It's just or like Hermann Hesse in German as well.
Awesome.
Well, we're going to wrap up.
Kieran, we're going to wrap up. I think to close the show, we'll play, if you want, Kieran will play one of your songs. I
think the new single, right?
You want to go for the new single?
Survive Happy Birthday by Kyron Bourke with lyrics by Eileen O'Neill and Maeve Smith, right? That on harmonies. It's a really interesting
harmony, yeah.
It's a duet, yeah.
But I'm on Facebook, all over Facebook.
And you're on Instagram, right?
Instagram, yeah. Usually,
so Kyron Bourke, guys. Kyron Bourke. Thanks for being on the show, Dan.
Awesome. Thank you very much for calling in. That was a lovely surprise. We didn't expect it.
Good to see you. Sorry, lads. I didn't realize that I'd feature. I just wanted to say hello and go.
It's epic.
It was a great coincidence that just as PJ was talking about your poems, you rang in like magic. Neither of us were prepared.
Did he say any good stuff? Did he say good stuff? Or
he said very good stuff.
Good.
Oh yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, so we will take us out with the new song "Survive Happy Birthday" that we mentioned. Mm-hmm. And just for any listeners that want to get in touch with any recommendations, you can email booksboys@hotmail.com. Just let us know what you've been reading, and you can be with the chance of winning a mystery book. Also, go to our website, booksboys.com. You can find links to all the different places that you can find the show and some links to purchase our recommendations and help support the show as well.
And especially today, as there were many books mentioned, so we'll write them down as well.
We'll write them down, and there'll be links to purchase and Audible audiobook links as well. Get a free audiobook on us. And this week's episode was brought to us by Miss Prissy Piddleduck's Lavatorial Books Emporium. Get the best books to read on the toilet.
That's awesome, man. Very important. Very important.
Guys, that's us. We will be back next month with another episode of Books Boys.
All right. Take care, guys. See you.
The wind shall sweep autumn's leaves. Sunshine will drizzle midst wispy webs. Soon we'll be together again. Hugs shall embrace our missing kisses. Fear will rest itself unwritten songs will be sung. Rested rhythms may tremble and purr. Saturday nights, midsummer perfume, bouquets of love. Let's plan to value life's gifts. Less is often the more that we need. We can survive to sense hope's enticement, and we'll sing.
Happy birthday
again.
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
It's good to touch you again.
Happy birthday to you. It's good to touch you again.
Books Boys was presented by The Dean and P.J. Bourke in association with Thaddeus Penguin Productions. This episode was brought to you by our sponsor,
Frissy Piddleduck's Lavatorial Emporium.
If you would like to get in touch, you can email us at booksboys@hotmail.com or visit us at booksboys.com. The intro uses Driving in the 70s from the Of Soundtracks and Garage Bands EP by Trapdoor. And the outro uses Dog's Light by Bravo Max from the album of the same name. All music used is either pod-safe or used with permission.
If you're in the US and you would like to purchase any of our recommendations, please use the Amazon links for your book purchases and the Audible link on our website for your audio book purchases and help support the show.
Thank you kindly for listening to us. Please tell your friends and come back next time for another episode of Books Boys. Read some books!
I didn't even know what an Aspidistra was. I had to look it up. And this is one chap who just says, "What ho?" and "What?" And I quite like that.